The envelope on my doormat wasn't just mail. It was a threat. A bright red stamp across the front screamed final notice intent to levy, and my hands shook as I tore it open. The letter claimed I owed the federal government $247,000 in back taxes for a business I didn't own. It was dated yesterday. They said I had ignored months of warnings, but as the world tilted sideways, I knew this was the first one I had ever seen. The envelope on my doormat wasn't just mail, it was a physical blow, a sudden shift in the atmospheric pressure of my hallway. A bright red stamp across the front screamed final notice intent to levy, and my hands shook as I bent down to retrieve it. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in consequence. The return address was a federal revenue agency, the kind of entity that does not send casual correspondence. I stood there in the entryway of my apartment, my keys still clutched in one hand, my purse sliding off my shoulder, staring at my own name printed in severe block letters, Sarah Coleman. I tore it open, ripping the paper in a way that felt jagged and desperate. The letter was dated yesterday. The text was dense, legalistic, and terrifying, but my eyes snapped immediately to the bolded figure in the center of the page, $247,000. The air left my lungs. I read it again, $247,000. It was an impossible number. It was the price of a small house, or a lifetime of student loans, or a catastrophic medical emergency. It was not a tax bill. It couldn't be. I had filed my taxes every year since I was 18. I used a simple online software. I had a single W-2 form for my job as a marketing coordinator. My refunds were usually enough to buy a nice dinner and put a few $100s into savings. I did not owe $250,000 to the government. I walked into my kitchen and placed the letter on the counter. Smoothing it out with a trembling hand, the text claimed I had ignored months of warnings. It cited statutes and penalties. It used words like negligence and enforcement. It felt like I had walked into the middle of a play where everyone knew the lines but me. Panic is a cold thing. It starts in the stomach and spreads to the fingertips. My first instinct was to check my bank account, to prove to myself that my reality was still intact. I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my banking app. Face ID. Let me in. The little circle spinning for a second that felt like an hour. The screen loaded. My stomach dropped through the floor. Next to my checking balance, there was a gray icon I had never seen before, a small padlock. I tapped it, and a notification slid up. Pre-levy hold. I swiped over to my savings. Same icon. I scrolled down to my recent transactions. Yesterday was payday. I knew the deposit hit at midnight. I saw the line item for my paycheck, but the text was red. Beside it, in brackets, was the word restricted. I couldn't breathe. They hadn't just sent a letter, they were already inside the walls. My rent was due in 4 days. My car payment was automatic. I had grocery shopping to do. I had a life that required the $3,000 currently sitting in that account. And someone, somewhere, had flipped a switch and turned off my access to my own survival. I dialed the number on the letter immediately. My thumb hovered over the digits, my brain screaming that this was a scam, a mistake, a clerical error of massive proportions. But scams didn't freeze your bank account. Scams didn't know your social security number. The automated voice was calm, robotic, and infuriating. I navigated through a maze of menus, pressing 1 for English, pressing 3 for collections, pressing 0 for an operator until the machine scolded me. I finally entered the queue. Your estimated wait time is greater than 2 hours. I sat on my kitchen floor, my back against the dishwasher, and waited. The hold music was a tinny, distorted classical piece that looped every 40 seconds. The sun moved across the floorboards. My phone battery dipped from 80% to 60, then 40. I didn't get up to drink water. I didn't change out of my work clothes. I just stared at the refrigerator magnets. A picture of me and my friends in Cabo. A save the date for my cousin's wedding, and felt them slipping away. 2 hours and 14 minutes later. The music stopped. There was a click, a rustle of a headset, and a voice. Agent Miller. Badge number 4922. How can I help you? The voice was flat, exhausted, stripped of any empathy. I need help, I stammered, my voice cracking. I just got a notice. It says I owe $247,000. There is a hold on my bank account. This has to be a mistake. I'm Sarah Coleman. I'm a marketing coordinator. I don't own a business. Name and social. The agent said. I gave it to him. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. It was a heavy, rhythmic sound, like a judge's gavel. Ms. Coleman, the agent said, his tone shifting from bored to authoritative. I am looking at the account now. The levy is valid. The balance reflects unpaid payroll taxes, interest, and failure to deposit penalties for the tax periods ending in 2022 and 2023. Payroll taxes? I asked, my voice rising. I don't have a payroll. I don't have employees. What is this for? The entity is Harbor Light Hospitality LLC, he recited. I have never heard of that company, I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I have never heard of Harbor Light Hospitality. I don't work there. I don't own it. Our records indicate you are the responsible party and a corporate officer. Agent Miller said, the assessments were sent to the address of record. You failed to respond to the 30-day letter and the 90-day letter. I never got those letters. I screamed into the empty kitchen. I lived in this apartment for 3 years. I never got anything. The address of record is not your current residence, he said, unbothered by my hysteria. But that is irrelevant now. As the responsible party, you are personally liable for the trust fund recovery penalty. No, I said, no. Listen to me. I did not do this. Someone used my name. This is identity theft. Ms. Coleman, he cut in, his voice dropping an octave. We have a Form 2848 on file. Power of attorney. It authorizes a representative to act on your behalf. It was signed by you. I froze. Signed by me? Signed and notarized, he confirmed. Who? I whispered. Who is the representative? Gordon Pike, enrolled agent. I don't know a Gordon Pike. I said, I have never signed a power of attorney. You have to stop this. You have to unfreeze my money. I can't pay my rent. You can submit a collection due process appeal, he said, sounding like he was reading from a script. But the levy stands until the debt is satisfied or a hardship status is approved, given the amount and your failure to cooperate previously. We are moving to wage garnishment next. Wage garnishment. The words hit me like a physical slap. Wage garnishment meant they would contact my employer. They would send a legal order to the payroll department at my firm. My boss, the VP of marketing, would find out. HR would know. I worked in a corporate environment where reputation was currency. If the federal government claimed I owed $250,000 for tax fraud, I wouldn't just lose my paycheck. I would lose my security clearance. I would lose my standing. I might lose my job. Please, I begged. Please don't contact my employer. I'll do whatever you need. I'll file the appeal. Just don't call my job. We follow the procedure. Ms. Coleman, he said. Good luck. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the apartment buzzing in my ears. Wage garnishment. It was a phrase that belonged to other people, to criminals, to people who didn't pay their debts. Not to Sarah Coleman, not to the girl who color-coded her calendar and had an 800 credit score. My credit score. I scrambled up from the floor and ran to my laptop. I opened the browser and went to one of those free credit report sites. I typed in my information, my fingers flying across the keys, making typos, backspacing, typing again. The report loaded. The number at the top, usually a comforting green, was gone. In its place was a warning banner. I clicked on Public Records. There it was. Federal tax lien. Filed 4 months ago. Amount, $247,000. I scrolled down frantically. Inquiries. There were inquiries from commercial lenders, equipment leasing companies, a vendor called Distinct Linens, all of them in the last 18 months, all of them checking the credit of Sarah Coleman. And then I saw the address. Under personal information, listed as a known address, was a street name I recognized but hadn't thought about in years. 442 Elm Street. Unit B. It wasn't where I lived. It wasn't where I had ever lived. But I knew the neighborhood. It was the old neighborhood, the one my parents had moved out of 10 years ago when they downsized. It was a rundown area now, mostly industrial parks and cheap rentals. Why would my name be attached to a Unit B in an industrial park? I needed to talk to someone. I needed to tell someone before I exploded. I picked up my phone again. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I scrolled to Mom and Dad. The phone rang twice. Hello? My mother's voice was bright, cheerful. It sounded like a transmission from a different planet. A planet where the sky wasn't falling. Mom, I said, and I heard the waver in my own voice. Something is wrong. Something is really wrong. Sarah? What is it? You sound terrible. Are you sick? I got a letter, I said, pacing the length of my kitchen, from the IRS, or the revenue agency. They froze my bank account. Mom, they took everything. They say I owe almost $250,000. There was a pause on the other end. It was a beat too long. A normal parent would have gasped. A normal parent would have screamed. What? Or, oh my God. My mother just breathed. 250,000? She repeated. Her voice was steady. Strangely, oddly steady. Yes, I shouted, needing her to match my panic. For a business called Harborlight Hospitality, I've never heard of it. They said I'm the owner. They said I signed papers. Mom, they're going to garnish my wages. I'm going to get fired. Sarah, honey, slow down. My father's voice chimed in from the background. He must have been on speaker. Don't overreact. Don't overreact? I felt a sharp, hot spike of anger pierce through the fear. Dad, my paycheck is gone. My rent is due. They think I'm a tax cheat. It's probably a mistake, he said. His tone was soothing. The way you talk to a spooked horse. You know how the government is. Computers mix things up. Names get crossed. It's not a mix-up, I insisted. There's a lien on my credit. There's a power of attorney signed by me. Well, look, my mother said, cutting in. Before you go stirring up a hornet's nest with lawyers and all that, maybe you just need to see what they want. Can you just set up a payment plan? The question hung in the air, heavy and absurd. A payment plan? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Mom, it is $247,000. I make $62,000 a year. I cannot set up a payment plan for $250,000 of debt that isn't mine. Why would you even suggest that? We're just trying to help, she said quickly. We just don't want you to make it worse by making a scene. Just calm down. Come over for dinner. We can look at it together. I hung up. I stared at the phone. They hadn't asked if I was okay. They hadn't asked for details. They had told me not to make a scene. They had asked if I could pay it. A cold prickle of suspicion started at the base of my neck. It was a crazy thought. It was a terrible thought. But it was there. I grabbed my purse. I wasn't going to wait for dinner. The drive to my parents' house usually took 30 minutes. I made it in 20. My mind was racing. Replaying the conversation. Don't overreact. Can you just set up a payment plan? Who asks their daughter to pay a fraudulent $250,000 debt just to avoid a scene? I pulled into their driveway. Their house was a nice suburban split level, the lawn manicured, the flower beds weeded. It was the picture of middle-class stability. My parents, retired for 5 years, were supposedly living on their pensions and Social Security. They were the people who clipped coupons and complained about the price of gas. I let myself in with my key. The house smelled like pot roast and lemon polish, the scent of my childhood. Mom? Dad? I called out. In the den! My father shouted. I walked down the short hallway. The den was their sanctuary. Big leather recliners, a wall of books, the TV always tuned to the news. But as I stepped in, the vibe was wrong. My mother was standing in front of the filing cabinet in the corner. It was an old metal thing they had possessed for decades, usually stuffed with appliance warranties and old Christmas cards. But today, I noticed something new. There was a shiny silver padlock looped through the handles. And next to it, on a small folding table that hadn't been there last week, was a printer, a high-end, laserjet office printer. It looked out of place among the cozy throw blankets and family photos. "Sarah," my mother said, startled. She took a half step to the right, blocking the cabinet with her body. "We didn't expect you so soon." I looked at the printer. I looked at the lock. I looked at her face. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and her smile was brittle. "What's with the lock?" I asked. "Oh, that?" She waved a hand dismissively. "Just security. You know, with all the hackers these days. Dad got paranoid about our birth certificates." "You keep your birth certificates in a metal cabinet anyone could carry out?" I asked. "Why are you so aggressive?" my father asked from his recliner. He didn't stand up to hug me. He kept his eyes on the TV, though the volume was muted. "We invited you over to help you calm down, not to be interrogated." "I'm not aggressive. Dad, I'm terrified." I walked further into the room. "I need you to understand. My life is falling apart. Today, right now, it'll blow over," he said, still not looking at me. Just a misunderstanding. I looked back at my mother. She was still standing guard by the cabinet. There was a stack of paper in the output tray of the new printer. I squinted. It looked like a form, a government form. "What are you printing?" I asked, taking a step toward her. "Nothing." She snatched the papers up and held them to her chest. "Just recipes. Sarah, sit down. You're making me nervous. Recipes don't have barcodes." "Mom," I reached for the papers. She pulled back, sharper than I had ever seen her move. "Don't," she snapped. The room went dead silent. My mother had never raised a hand to me, never yelled like that. We were the Colemans. We were quiet. We were polite. We didn't snatch things. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fine lines of sweat on her upper lip. I saw the way her fingers were digging into the paper, crumpling it. I stepped back. The suspicion in my gut solidified into a hard, cold knot. "I have to go." I said, "You just got here." My father said, finally looking at me, "Stay for dinner. We made roast." "I can't." I said, I have to figure this out." I turned and walked out. I heard my mother call my name, but I didn't stop. I got in my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a minute, staring at the garage door, waiting for my heart to stop hammering against my ribs. I didn't go back to my apartment immediately. I drove to my office building. It was 7 in the evening, so the lot was mostly empty. I needed to do damage control. I badged in and went up to the 4th floor. The office was dark, save for the emergency lights and the glow of a few monitors. I walked to the HR director's office. The door was closed. I couldn't talk to her now, but standing there, looking at her nameplate, Linda Gorski, Director of Human Resources, made the threat real. I went to my cubicle. I sat in my ergonomic chair, surrounded by my little successes, my framed degree, a generic award for Employee of the Month, a succulent plant I had kept alive for 2 years. If they garnished my wages, Linda would get a letter. She would have to process it. She would know. The gossip would start. Sarah Coleman, the quiet girl in marketing, is in trouble with the feds. Sarah Coleman is a liability. I tried to act normal, even though I was alone. I straightened my stapler. I moved my mouse so my computer wouldn't sleep, but inside, I was vibrating. I realized I didn't have health insurance without this job. I realized my lease had a clause about financial solvency. I realized that everything I had built, the fragile, precious independence of a 34-year-old woman making it on her own, was held together by invisible bolts. And someone had come along with a wrench and loosened them all. I drove home in a fog. I didn't eat dinner. I drank a glass of tap water and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Harbor Light Hospitality, Unit B on Elm Street, Gordon Pike. The names swirled in the dark. I thought about my parents. I thought about the lock on the cabinet. I thought about the weird calmness in my father's voice. Don't overreact. Why weren't they angry? If someone stole my identity, my parents should be the first ones demanding justice. They should be offering to pay for a lawyer. They shouldn't be suggesting I pay $250,000 to make it go away. Sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, the red numbers on my alarm clock mocking me. 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, at 3 in the morning, I sat up. The tears that had been threatening to fall all day finally dried up. I felt something else replacing them. It was a cold, hard clarity. Crying wasn't going to fix this. Begging the agent on the phone wasn't going to fix this. And clearly, my parents weren't going to fix this. I turned on my bedside lamp. The light was harsh, chasing away the shadows. I got out of bed and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it The Proof. I started logging everything. I took screenshots of the bank hold. I scanned the letter from the agency. I wrote down the badge number of Agent Miller. I wrote down the date and time of the call with my parents. I wrote down the description of the new printer and the lock on the cabinet. I wasn't Sarah the daughter anymore. I wasn't Sarah the victim. I was Sarah the witness. And I was going to build a case. I would collect every scrap of paper, every digital footprint, every inconsistent lie. I would find out who Gordon Pike was. I would find out what Harbor Light Hospitality was. If my life depended on paper, then I was going to bury them in it. I typed out a list of next steps. 1. Get the full account transcript. 2. Go to the Secretary of State Registry. 3. Find the mailbox. I looked at the list. It looked like a battle plan. I closed the laptop. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat in the chair, watching the sun come up over the city, watching the light hit the buildings where millions of people were waking up to normal lives, unaware that mine had ended the day before. I was ready to start the new one, the one where I fought back. The morning sun didn't bring relief. It brought the blinding glare of reality. I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee untouched near my elbow, staring at the screen of my laptop. I had spent the last 48 hours in a fugue state of panic and research, and now I was looking at the digital anatomy of my ruin. I had requested my full account transcript through the agency's online portal. It had taken hours to verify my identity, scanning my driver's license and moving my face in front of the camera until the system was satisfied I was real. The irony wasn't lost on me. The government needed biometric proof to let me see my own tax records, but apparently, they had let someone else ruin my life with nothing more than a photocopy and a signature. The transcript was a wall of codes and numbers, but the summary at the top was clear enough to stop my heart. The debt wasn't for income tax. It wasn't because I had failed to report a freelance gig or messed up a deduction. The codes listed were for Form 941, Employer's Quarterly Federal Tax Return. I Googled the codes, my fingers flying. The search results made me nauseous. Trust fund recovery penalty. I read the definition out loud to the empty room. The 100% penalty. Used to collect unpaid employment taxes from a responsible person who willfully failed to collect or pay them. This wasn't just debt. This was theft. The money owed was money that had been withheld from employees' paychecks, Social Security, Medicare, income tax withholding, and then never sent to the government. It was money that belonged to workers, held in trust, and someone had spent it. And because the law viewed that money as sacred, they didn't just go after the company, they pierced the corporate veil. They went after the human being in charge. According to the federal government, that human being was me. I closed the tab and opened a new one. I navigated to the Secretary of State's business registry. I typed in the name that had been haunting me since the phone call with Agent Miller. Harbor Light Hospitality, LLC. The entry popped up instantly. Status: active/non-compliant. I clicked on the filing history. The articles of organization were dated 3 years ago. I scrolled down to the section labeled Management. There it was. Manager: Sarah Coleman. My address was listed as 442 Elm Street, Unit B, the old neighborhood, but it was the contact information that made the hair on my arms stand up. The email address listed for the registered agent wasn't mine. It was Skolman, Harborg Mail. Come. I stared at it. It was so close. My actual email was Sarah, Coleman Gmail.com. Whoever had set this up hadn't just used my name. They had created a doppelganger email. Something that would look legitimate at a glance but ensure I never saw a single notification. I grabbed my keys. I needed to see 442 Elm Street. The drive took me back to the part of town where I had grown up, but further east, past the elementary school and the park, into the strip of commercial zoning that buffered the highway. I knew the area, but I didn't know this building. When I arrived, Unit B wasn't an office, it wasn't a restaurant. It was a pack-and-ship store sandwiched between a vape shop and a discount mattress outlet. The windows were plastered with advertisements for notary services and passport photos. I parked and walked in. The bell above the door jingled aggressively. The air inside smelled of packing tape and stale popcorn. A young guy with gauges in his ears was behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. "Help you?" he asked, not looking up. "I'm looking for Unit B." I said, "This is Unit B," he said. I'm looking for a mailbox holder. Box 442. He finally looked up, eyeing me with suspicion. "We don't give out info on box holders. Privacy policy. My name is Sarah Coleman," I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out my license. "That box is registered in my name. I need to know who opened it." He hesitated, then took my license. He typed something into his computer. His eyebrows shot up. "Yeah, okay. You're listed as the primary. Who opened it?" I asked, leaning over the counter. "When was it opened?" 3 years ago. He said, "Let me check the file. We keep scanned apps." He clicked a few times, then turned the monitor so I could see. The application form was on the screen. The handwriting was blocky, generic, but the signature at the bottom read, "Sarah Coleman." It looked practiced. It looked like someone had traced my signature from a high school yearbook. And then he clicked to the next image. "Here is the ID used to verify," he said. I leaned in, my breath catching. It was a driver's license. It had my name. It had my old address. It had my date of birth. But the photo wasn't me. It was grainy. A black and white photocopy scan. But the face was undeniable. It was a woman with dark hair like mine. But the jawline was softer. The eyes slightly wider. It looked like a cousin I didn't have. It was a fake ID. A good one. Good enough to fool a clerk at a strip mall mailbox store. "Is that you?" the clerk asked, looking from the screen to me. "No," I whispered. "That is not me." "Well," he said, pulling the monitor back, "someone came in here with that card and your social security card and opened the box. We followed protocol." "Did they come often?" I asked. "To pick up mail?" He shrugged. "I've only been here 6 months, but the logs show pickups every Friday for a long time. Then it stopped about 4 months ago. Box is overdue now." We were about to close it. I walked out of the store into the bright, smoggy sunlight. I felt violated. It wasn't just a clerical error. It was a person who had walked into that store, wearing my name like a costume, presenting a fake face to the world, and signing a contract that would eventually bind me to a $250,000 anchor. I needed a lawyer. Mara Duval's office was in a glass tower downtown, the kind of place that smelled of expensive espresso and intimidation. She was a tax controversy attorney, a specialist in the specific kind of hell I was currently inhabiting. I had found her reviews online. Ruthless, expensive, effective. She sat behind a desk that looked like a slab of floating ice. She was older than me, maybe 50, with a sharp bob cut and glasses that framed eyes that had seen every variation of financial ruin. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. I told her about the notice, the bank hold, the weird reaction from my parents, the mailbox store, the fake ID. I laid the red-stamped letter on her desk like a dead animal. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "Sarah," she said. Her voice was deeper than I expected. Gravelly. "I believe you. Let me start with that. I believe you are the victim of identity theft." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet," she said, putting her glasses back on. "Because what I believe doesn't matter. What matters is what the revenue agency believes. And right now, their file says you are the person who stole $247,000 from the Treasury. But I have proof." I said, "The fake ID?" "The mailbox." Mara held up a hand. To the agency. That looks like you hired a runner. Or you're lying. You have to understand the default stance of a revenue officer in a trust fund recovery case. Their stance is not innocent until proven guilty. It is guilty until the money is collected. They don't care about justice. Sarah. They care about solvency. You have a W-2 job. You have a bank account. You are solvent. Therefore, you are the target. She opened a folder on her desk. I had emailed her the transcript before the meeting. I pulled the underlying administrative file this morning. She said, I have contacts in the priority unit. I wanted to see what they were looking at before you came in. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. This is why they are so confident. I looked at the document. It was Form 2848, Power of Attorney and Declaration of Representative. It authorized a man named Gordon Pike to receive confidential tax information and perform any and all acts that I could perform with respect to the tax matters of Harborlight Hospitality, LLC. At the bottom of the page was my signature, and next to it was a round, purple stamp. It's notarized, Mara said softly. I stared at the stamp. State of Florida. Notary Public. Commission expires, 2024. I have never met a Gordon Pike, I said, my voice shaking. I have never signed this. A notarized document carries a presumption of validity in court, Mara said. To overturn this, we have to prove fraud. Not just suggest it, prove it. We need to find the notary. We need to find Gordon Pike. But I warn you, Pike is likely a ghost or a mill operator. She leaned forward. But here's the hard part. Sarah. Fraud this sophisticated, fake IDs, shell companies, payroll accounts, notarized powers of attorney, it usually doesn't happen to random strangers. Identity thieves usually steal your refund. They don't set up complex LLCs and pay vendors for 2 years while stiffing the government. This was an operating business. It had cash flow. It had employees. She paused, watching me. Whoever did this needed your social security number. Your mother's maiden name, your history. They needed to know you wouldn't be checking certain mail. They needed access. I knew where she was going. I had known it since the moment I saw the lock on my parents' cabinet. My parents, I whispered. Mara didn't flinch. You need to talk to them. And this time, you don't ask. You demand. Because if we are going to fight this, we have to file a police report. We have to file an identity theft affidavit. And that affidavit will likely launch a criminal investigation into whoever signed your name. She let that hang in the air. If it's your parents, Sarah, and you sign that affidavit, you are sending them to prison. You need to know that before we proceed. I walked out of her office into the city noise, feeling like I was walking underwater. Prison. The word bounced around my skull. I got in my car and drove. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the suburbs. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, my father was washing his car. It was such a mundane, normal activity. He was spraying the hubcaps with a hose, humming to himself. It made me furious. I slammed my car door. He looked up, smiling tentatively. Hey, honey, we didn't think we'd see you. I'm done, Dad, I said, walking up the driveway. Sarah, wait, I'm done with the lies. I walked right past him, toward the front door. He dropped the hose. Water hissed onto the pavement. Sarah, hold on. I burst into the house. My mother was in the kitchen, chopping carrots. She jumped when the door slammed. Sarah, what on earth? I slammed the folder Mara had given me onto the kitchen island. It slid across the granite and hit the bowl of carrots. Harborlight Hospitality, I said. Gordon Pike, $247,000. My mother's face went white. She put the knife down. Dad came running in behind me, wiping his wet hands on his pants. Sarah, you need to calm down. I turned on him. Stop telling me to calm down. I am facing federal indictment. I have a lawyer telling me I might have to send you to jail to save myself. The room went silent. The only sound was the refrigerator humming. Jail? My mother whispered. Yes, Mom. Jail. Fraud. Identity theft. Perjury. I pointed at the folder. I know about the mailbox on Elm Street. I know about the fake ID. I know about the power of attorney. I know you put a lock on the cabinet because you're hiding the evidence. My father sank into one of the kitchen chairs. He looked suddenly very old. His shoulders collapsed. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said quietly. I stared at him. What? It was supposed to be temporary, he said. He looked at his hands. We just needed a name, a clean name, a clean name. I repeated, my name. We couldn't get the loan, my mother said, her voice trembling. After the construction business went under in 2008, our credit never came back. You know that. We had the bankruptcy on our record. No bank would touch us. So you stole my identity? We didn't steal it, she cried. Defensive now. We borrowed it. We gave you life. Sarah, we raised you. We thought we could build something for the family. The cafe was going to be our retirement. It was going to be something we could leave to you. The cafe? I asked. The waterfront cafe? My father said, down by the marina. We leased the space 3 years ago. We thought, if we could just get it running, get the cash flow up, we could switch the name off the paperwork before you ever knew. I felt like I was going to throw up. The waterfront cafe. I remembered them mentioning a friend's place they were helping out at. I remembered them spending long hours consulting. They weren't consulting. They were running a business in my name, and it failed. I said, it was the overhead. My father said, pleading with his eyes. The rent was astronomical, then the supply chain issues. We had vendors demanding cash on delivery. We had to pay the food suppliers, or we couldn't open the doors. So you stopped paying the taxes. I said, we meant to pay them back. He insisted. We were juggling. We thought, one good summer. If we just had one good summer season, we could catch up. But the summer was rainy. The tourists didn't come. The debt it snowballed. And you kept it going. I said, you kept payroll running. We had staff. Sarah. My mother was crying now. Sweet girls, college students. We couldn't just fire them. We had to pay them. So you stole their tax money, I said coldly, and you let the government think I did it. I looked at the folder again. How? I asked. How did you open the payroll account? How did you verify the identity? My father looked away. Gordon helped us, he muttered. Who is Gordon? Gordon Pike. He said, he's a guy. He knows how the systems work. He said he could handle the paperwork so we wouldn't have to bother you. Bother me? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. You forged my signature. You got a fake ID. Gordon said it was standard practice for silent partners. My father said, I looked at my mother. And the payroll account? The login? She wiped her eyes. We used your social. You know we have it in the old files. And for the verification. She hesitated. What? I demanded. We used my cell number for the password reset, she whispered. But we put it in under your name. I closed my eyes. That was the nail in the coffin. A direct digital link between my identity and their phone. And the power of attorney? I asked. Who signed that? Gordon had a girl. My father said. She practiced your signature. I looked at them. Really looked at them. My parents. The people who taught me to tell the truth. The people who punished me when I lied about homework. They were strangers. They were desperate. Sloppy criminals who had sold me out for a failed cafe and a dream that wasn't mine. You have to fix this. I said, you have to go to the revenue agency and tell them, we can't. My mother shrieked, Sarah, they'll take the house. They'll take Dad's pension. We'll be destitute. And if you don't, I asked, they take my paycheck. They take my future. I lose my job. I lose everything. Just give us time. My father begged. We can sell the boat. We can borrow from Uncle Jerry. We can make a payment offer. Just don't tell them it was us. Please, Sarah, we're your parents. I looked at the terror in their eyes. It was manipulative. It was pathetic. And God help me. It worked. I couldn't stand there and tell them I was going to call the police right then and there. The bond was too deep. The habit of being the good daughter too ingrained. I need to think. I said. I grabbed the folder and walked out. They called after me, but I didn't stop. I drove back to my apartment in silence. The city lights blurred past. I felt hollowed out. When I got home, I threw the folder on my desk and collapsed onto my sofa. I needed to find a way to prove I wasn't involved without explicitly naming them yet. I needed to buy time. I thought about what Mara had said. Show you lacked control. Show you weren't there. I sat up. The timeline. I opened my laptop again. I pulled up the transcript and the dates of the key documents. The power of attorney was signed on October 12th. 2 years ago, I opened my work calendar. I scrolled back. 2 years ago, October. My heart leaped. October 10th through October 14th. Annual Marketing Conference. Chicago. I wasn't in the state. I frantically opened my old expense reports. There it was. Flight receipt. Delta Airlines. Departs 10 a.m. October 10th. Returns 6 p.m. October 14th. I checked my hotel folio. The Palmer House Hilton. Room charges for room service on the night of the 12th. I checked my badge scans. My company kept logs of when we swiped into the office. But for the conference, I had photos. I scrolled through my phone. A selfie of me and my team in front of the Bean in Millennium Park. Date stamp. October 12th. 4:30 p.m. The power of attorney was notarized in this city. On that day, I couldn't have signed it. Physically, spatially, impossible. I started digging for more. The bank signature card for the HarborLight account. It was dated June 4th. I checked my calendar. June 4th, client on site, Dallas. I had an alibi. I had a rock-solid, documentable alibi for the key moments of fraud. I started printing. Flight confirmations, hotel receipts, Uber rides, conference agendas. I was building a timeline that proved Sarah Coleman, the physical human being, was nowhere near the documents signed by Sarah Coleman, the corporate officer. It wasn't enough to clear me completely. Mara warned me about that. They could argue I directed it remotely, but it was a crack in their case. It proved the signature was a forgery. I worked until midnight, organizing the papers into a binder. I felt a grim satisfaction. I was fighting back. I walked to the front door to check the mail, which I had ignored when I came in earlier. I grabbed the stack from the floor, bills, junk, coupons, and a plain white envelope. It had a forwarding sticker on it. It had been sent to the mailbox store, Unit B, and then forwarded to my parents' house, and then, for some reason, forwarded here. Or maybe my parents had slipped it into my mail stack when I wasn't looking? No. The postmark was fresh. The forwarding order must have just caught up. I opened it. Inside was a glossy, heavy stock letter. Congratulations on your anniversary. I unfolded it. It was from a regional bank I didn't use. Dear Sarah Coleman, thank you for being a valued business partner. We are celebrating 2 years of Seagrass Provisions serving our community. We look forward to continuing to support your business banking needs. I stared at the letter. Seagrass Provisions. My father had mentioned the cafe. He had said HarborLight Hospitality, but this letter wasn't addressed to HarborLight. It was addressed to Seagrass Provisions, and it thanked me for opening a business account 2 years ago. My stomach turned over. HarborLight wasn't the only one. There was another company, another account. I looked at the date. 2 years. That meant Seagrass Provisions was running parallel to HarborLight. I dropped the letter on the table. The debt wasn't just $247,000. That was just the debt for HarborLight. If there was another company, I realized then that I wasn't at the bottom of the hole. I was still falling. The paper felt flimsy in my hands. Considering it was supposed to save my life, it was Form 14039, the Identity Theft Affidavit. I sat in Mara Duval's conference room, a pen hovering over the signature line. The room was silent except for the hum of the building's HVAC system and the distant traffic of the city below. This is the nuclear option. Sarah, Mara said. She was sitting across from me, her hands folded on the polished mahogany table. Once we file this, we are formally accusing someone of a felony. The agency's Criminal Investigation Division will eventually look at it. I looked at the boxes I had checked. Someone used my information to file a return. Someone used my information to obtain employment. Someone used my information to open a business. I signed it. The ink looked black and permanent against the white page. We are also filing the collection due process hearing request, Mara continued, sliding another stack of papers toward me. This challenges the levy. We are arguing that you are not the responsible party because you did not willfully fail to pay, nor did you have the duty to pay. I signed that one too. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind you get when you finally throw a punch after taking a beating. So this stops it? I asked. The bank hold? The letters? Mara hesitated. She took the papers and tapped them on the table to straighten the stack. Ideally, yes, but I need to manage your expectations. I spoke to Officer Miller this morning. He accepted the faxed copies. But he was very clear. Filing an affidavit does not automatically pause enforcement in a trust fund recovery case. My stomach tightened. Why not? I'm telling them it's fraud. Because to them, a responsible party claiming fraud is the oldest excuse in the book. Mara said gently, they see it every day. Owners who claim they didn't know. Partners who claim they were silent. Until we provide concrete, irrefutable proof that you had no control over these funds. The computer system keeps moving forward. Miller said he would flag the account, but the collection statute is still active. So they can still take my money? I asked. They can, she said. And they might. I left her office feeling heavier than when I arrived. I had fired the gun, but the bullet hadn't hit anything yet. The machine was too big, too slow, and too indifferent. The reality of Mara's warning hit me 3 days later, in the fluorescent aisle of a grocery store. I had been living on adrenaline and granola bars, but my refrigerator was empty. I stopped at the store on my way home from work, needing to perform the basic human function of buying food. I filled my basket with the essentials: milk, eggs, spinach, a rotisserie chicken. I grabbed a bottle of wine, thinking maybe, just maybe, it would help me sleep for more than 4 hours. The store was crowded. It was 5:30 on a Tuesday, the peak hour for tired commuters. I waited in line, scrolling through my emails on my phone, checking for updates from Mara, updates from the agency, updates from the disaster my life had become. I reached the register, the cashier, a teenage girl with bright blue eyeliner, scanned my items efficiently. $42.16, she said. I slid my debit card into the chip reader. I stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar beep. Processing. It took longer than usual, authorizing, and then, a harsh, flat buzz. Declined. I stared at the word. It was red letters on a gray screen. Oh. Sorry, I said, my face instantly heating up. The chip is finicky. Let me try again. I pulled it out and shoved it back in. I wiggled it, praying to whatever God watched over banking networks. Declined. The cashier looked at me. The woman behind me in line shifted her weight and sighed loudly. Do you have another card? The girl asked, popping her gum. I don't. I stammered. I do. But my credit cards were maxed out or frozen because of the lien alerts. This debit account was all I had. I knew I had $3,000 in there. I had checked it that morning. Wait, I said, pulling up my banking app. I have money. I swear. I opened the app. The balance still showed $3,000. But then I saw the detail line. Available balance, $0. Held funds, $3,000. The levy hadn't just restricted the deposit, it had swallowed the entire account. The agency had moved from a pre-levy hold to a full freeze. They had ring-fenced every penny I owned. I looked up at the cashier. The line behind me was growing. People were staring. I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck. Judgmental. Impatient. They saw a woman in a business suit who couldn't pay for $40 of groceries. They saw a failure. I can't, I whispered. My hands started to shake. I can't pay for this. You want me to put it back? The girl asked, her voice loud enough to carry to the produce section. Yes, I said, my voice cracking. I'm sorry. I had to move the bags aside. I had to physically take the rotisserie chicken and the wine and push them across the scanner toward her. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the milk. It's fine, the woman behind me snapped, stepping forward. Can we go? I turned and fled. I walked out of the store with nothing, my face burning with a humiliation so deep it felt like a chemical burn. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. It wasn't the weeping of heartbreak, it was the weeping of total powerlessness. I was 34 years old. I had a career. I paid my bills. And I couldn't buy milk. The hunger turned into a cold, hard resolve. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my blazer. I needed evidence. I needed it now. The next day, I went back to the mailbox store. The same clerk wasn't there. Instead, it was an older man, the owner, judging by the way he was rearranging the display of greeting cards with proprietary annoyance. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to the counter. "I was here a few days ago about box 442. He looked over his glasses. "The police haven't called me." "If that's what you're asking, I'm not asking about the police." I said, "I need to know about the surveillance footage. My lawyer says we can subpoena it. But I'm hoping you can just tell me if you have it. I need to see who opened that box." He sighed and walked behind the counter. He tapped on a keyboard that looked like it was from the 90s. "Look, lady, this system loops every 30 days. Cloud storage is expensive. Whatever happened 3 years ago? It's gone. Overwritten 100 times." My heart sank. I had pinned so much hope on a grainy video clip. "Are you sure?" I pressed. "Is there a backup? An archive?" "No," he said firmly. "It's gone." He turned back to his screen, dismissing me. I stood there, feeling the walls close in. Another dead end. Another victory for the lie. Then, a voice came from the back room. Wait, was it box 442? A young woman came out, carrying a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. She was wearing a uniform polo that was 2 sizes too big. "Yes," I said, turning to her. "Harbor Light Hospitality. I remember them." She said, "You do?" I stepped closer to the counter, ignoring the owner's scowl. "Yeah," she said, leaning against a stack of packing peanuts. "They were nice. Came in every Tuesday like clockwork for a while. Usually bought a roll of stamps, too." "They?" I asked. "Yeah, a couple." She said, "Older? Maybe 60s? The guy was tall. Had that white hair that looks expensive. The lady was shorter, always wore those flowy scarves. They were, I don't know. They looked like grandparents. Polite, not like the usual rude people we get." I felt a chill slide down my spine. Tall, white hair, flowy scarves. It was a perfect description of my parents. My father, who prided himself on his silver mane. My mother, who tried to hide her neck with silk scarves she bought at outlet stores. "Did they ever say their names?" I asked. The girl frowned. I think they said they were picking up for their daughter. Said she was busy running the company. They seemed really proud of her. Proud of her. The words twisted in my gut like a knife. They had stood in this store, chatting with this girl, playing the role of supportive parents helping their successful daughter, all while intercepting the legal notices that were warning me of my own destruction. They had used their pride as a cover story for their theft. "Thank you," I whispered. I walked out of the store. I didn't have the video, but I had a witness. I wrote down the girl's name, Jessica, and the time of our conversation in my notebook. It was hearsay, maybe, but it was a thread. Work became a torture chamber. I sat in my cubicle, surrounded by the hum of productivity, keyboards clacking, phones ringing, people laughing about weekend plans. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I was there, but I wasn't. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I was terrified it was HR, terrified it was the garnishment order. I took to hiding during my lunch hour. I would go out to my car, drive to the far corner of the parking garage, and make my calls. I called the bank to beg for access to funds. Denied. I called the credit bureaus to dispute the lien. Pending. I called Mara to relay the information about Jessica. Good. But we need hard docs. Then I would sit there, practicing. I rehearsed phrases in the rearview mirror, watching my own mouth to make sure I didn't look like I was about to scream. "I'm dealing with a minor administrative error with the tax authorities. It's an identity theft issue, fully under control. No, I don't know why payroll got a letter. I'll clear it up immediately. I practiced keeping my voice in the lower register, keeping the tremor out. I practiced the smile, the tight, professional smile that says everything is fine. Then I would go back inside, sit at my desk, and type marketing copy about finding your perfect vacation, while my mind was calculating how many days I could survive without access to money. The breakthrough happened at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. I was scouring the internet, searching for anything connected to Harbor Light Hospitality. I had already found the registry entry, but I was looking for digital footprints, social media, reviews, anything. I found a cached version of a coming soon page for the Waterfront Cafe. It was a generic landing page, long taken down. But at the bottom, in the footer, there was a link. Vendor portal. I clicked it. It led to a cloud storage login page. I stared at it. It was a long shot, a desperate shot. I typed in the email address I had found on the Secretary of State filing, Skolman, Harborgmail.com. For the password. I hesitated. My parents were creatures of habit. They used the same 3 passwords for everything: the name of our first dog, the street we lived on, my birthday. I tried the dog's name, Buster 1998. Incorrect password. I tried the street, Mapleview 22. Incorrect password. I tried a variation they used for their Netflix account, Coleman Family 1. The screen loaded, a spinning wheel, and then a folder structure appeared. I gasped. The sound loud in the silent apartment. I was in. It was a Google Drive folder, and it was full. There were subfolders labeled Lease, Menus, Permits, Payroll. I clicked on Payroll. There were PDFs everywhere, authorization forms, direct deposit setups, tax filings. I opened a document labeled Direct Deposit Authorization. It was signed by Sarah Coleman. I zoomed in. The signature was weird. It looked like my signature. The way I sign things quickly, the swoop of the S, the loop of the C. But the slant was wrong. It tilted to the left. I write with a rightward slant. I opened another one. Operating agreement. This signature was different. The S was looped at the bottom, not the top. I opened a third. Bank signature card. This one looked almost perfect, but the ink pressure was heavy. Uniform. Like someone had drawn it slowly. Rather than signed it, they weren't just forging my name, they were evolving it. I could see the progression in the dates. The early documents were shaky. The later ones were confident. They had practiced. Then I saw a folder labeled Gordon. I clicked it. It contained email threads saved as PDFs. I opened one. It was between Skolman, Harborgmail, Com and G Pike, Tax Services Secure Mail, Com. Subject: Q3 returns. Gordon. Attached are the hours for the staff. Please file the 941s. As discussed, we are holding the deposit for now to cover the vendor check. We'll catch up next month. Signed, Sarah. I read the response from Gordon. Sarah, be careful. The penalties stack up fast, but I will file as zero liability if you insist. We need to do another video check-in soon. To verify the new officer details. Video check-in. He had mentioned a video call. I searched the folder for video. Nothing, but I had Gordon's email, and now I had proof that he was communicating with an imposter who was explicitly instructing him to commit tax fraud. I didn't wait. I found Gordon Pike's business number online. It was a voice-over IP number, the kind that forwards to a cell phone. I called him the next morning from my car. "This is Pike," a voice answered, gruff, impatient. "Mr. Pike, this is Sarah Coleman, the real Sarah Coleman." There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. "I think you do." I said, "I'm looking at your emails." "Gordon, I'm looking at the folder where you discussed holding back payroll deposits. You're listed as my power of attorney. I have a signed engagement letter," he said, his voice tightening. "I have a notarized POA. I did my due diligence. You video called me." I said, "That's what you told the agency. You said you verified my identity." "I did," he said defensively. "We did a Zoom call. You held up your license. We talked about the business plan. You were very articulate about the cash flow issues. I have never spoken to you in my life, I shouted. That wasn't me? Look, lady, he said. The woman on the screen looked like the woman on the license. She knew the social. She knew the mother's maiden name. She knew the address. If someone coached her, they did a hell of a job. But I'm not taking the fall for this. I followed the protocols. Who was she? I asked. Describe her. I'm not saying another word without a subpoena, he said. You want answers? Talk to the people who paid my invoices. He hung up. I sat there, the phone warm against my ear. Talk to the people who paid my invoices. He knew. Deep down, he knew. He might have been duped by the imposter, but he knew who was writing the checks. He knew it was my parents. That afternoon, the anger that had been fueling me began to curdle into something else, something slower and more painful. I was sitting in my office, trying to format a spreadsheet, but the numbers kept swimming. I thought about my father. I thought about him teaching me to ride a bike. I thought about him driving me to college, carrying my boxes up 3 flights of stairs, hugging me and telling me to be proud of myself. I thought about my mother making me soup when I had the flu. These were the people who had done this. The grief hit me like a rogue wave. It wasn't just that they had stolen my money. They had stolen my past. Every memory I had of them was now tainted. Had they always been this selfish? Was the love real, or was I just an asset they were waiting to liquidate? I found myself hesitating. I had the cloud login. I had the emails. I could send them to Mara right now. Mara would send them to the agency. The agency would trace the IP addresses. The police would go to my parents' house. I hovered my mouse over the send button on the email to Mara. Attach. Cloud_evidence.zip. My finger trembled. If I sent this, I was orphaning myself. I was choosing to be alone in the world. I didn't click send, not yet. I closed the laptop and put my head in my hands. I needed to be ruthless. But the little girl inside me was still trying to protect them. I met Mara late that Friday. I looked wreck. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and I hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night for a week. We need a strategy for the appeals conference, Mara said. She looked at me with concern but kept it professional. The agency is going to ask one question. Did you have authority and control? I don't know how to prove a negative. I said, we use the tests, she said, counting on her fingers. 1. Did you have the power to hire and fire? 2. Did you have check signing authority? 3. Did you have access to the books? 4. Did you benefit from the funds? I shook my head. No to all of them. We need to prove the benefit part specifically. Mara said, that's often the smoking gun. If we can show where the money went, and that it didn't go to you, it helps destroy the narrative that you were the owner. She pulled out a stack of bank statements. I subpoenaed the bank records for Harbor Light Hospitality, she said. They came in this morning. She pushed them toward me. I want you to look at the disbursements. I opened the statement. It was a list of transactions: Cisco Foods, Dominion Energy, Seagrass Marina, and then a recurring transfer. Transfer to Chase Mortgage, $2,400. It happened every month. On the 15th of every month, $2,400 left the Harbor Light account and went to Chase Mortgage. I knew that number. I knew that bank. It was my parents' mortgage payment. I scanned the dates. September, October, November. I looked at the tax liability column on the transcript Mara had given me earlier, in October. The payroll tax liability was $6,000. It wasn't paid, but the mortgage was paid. In November, the payroll tax liability was $5,000. It wasn't paid, but the mortgage was paid. I felt bile rise in my throat. They hadn't just mismanaged the business. They hadn't just tried to keep the lights on. They had made a choice. Every single month, they sat down and decided to pay for the roof over their heads with the money that was supposed to go to the government for their employees' taxes, and they did it in my name. They were living in a house paid for with my destruction. I looked up at Mara. They paid their mortgage, I whispered, with the tax money. Mara nodded grimly. That is the definition of willfulness. Using trust fund money to pay other creditors, including oneself, while the tax debt remains. This proves someone benefited, and since the mortgage isn't in your name, it proves it wasn't me. I finished. It was the smoking gun, but it was also the bullet that killed the last shred of my hesitation. They had chosen their comfort over my safety, repeatedly, systematically. The phone on Mara's desk rang. She picked it up. Mara Duval. She listened. Her face hardened. I see. Yes, I understand the statute, but we have a CDP hearing request pending. She listened again. Okay, I will inform the client. She hung up and looked at me. That was Agent Miller. She said, "What?" I asked. He reviewed the initial dispute packet. He says the evidence is circumstantial. The affidavit is filed, but until there is a police report or a court order naming another responsible party, he is proceeding. Proceeding with what? Wage garnishment, Mara said. He gave us a deadline. How long? I asked. 10 days. Sarah, if we don't produce persuasive, third-party evidence that identifies the true perpetrator by the end of the month, he sends the levy to your employer. 10 days. Because, Mara added, her voice soft but unyielding. The file still shows you as the officer, and the file is king. I looked at the bank statement. I looked at the mortgage payment. I stood up. The hesitation was gone. The grief was still there. But it had turned into fuel. I'll get the evidence, I said. I didn't tell her about the cloud folder yet. I needed one more thing. I needed to look them in the eye one last time. I walked out of the office. The clock was ticking. 10 days to save my life. 10 days to destroy theirs. The bank records arrived in a heavy sealed envelope that Mara Duval handed to me like it was a loaded weapon. We were sitting in her office, the city skyline gray and indifferent behind her, but the air between us was electric with the potential of what lay inside. Open it, Mara said. I slit the envelope. Inside were high-resolution scans of signature cards, the foundational documents that authorize a human being to touch the money inside a corporate account. I flipped past the cover sheet and stared at the card for the Harbor Light Hospitality operating account. There was my name. There was a signature that looked like mine. A lazy loop on the S, a sharp cross T. Look at the date, Mara said, pointing with a manicured nail. And look at the branch code. I scanned the bottom of the card. Date of execution, June 4th, 2021. Branch identifier, 049. Location, Ocala, Florida. I felt a rush of cold air fill my lungs. Ocala. I have never been to Ocala. I said, I know. Mara said, we checked your credit card statements from that week. On June 4th, 2021. You bought a coffee at O'Hare International Airport at 6 in the morning. You bought a salad in downtown Chicago at noon. And you paid for a hotel room at the Palmer House Hilton that evening. I looked at the signature card again. It was physical impossibility. I could not be standing at a teller window in Central Florida signing a document while I was sitting in a conference room in Illinois. This is it, I said, my voice trembling. This proves it wasn't me. It proves you weren't physically present at the bank, Mara corrected. But the bank officer signed it as witnessed. That means someone stood there, presented identification with your name on it, and signed that card. She pulled another document from her file. And that brings us to the notary, she said. She slid a photocopy across the desk. It was a page from a notary journal, the logbook that notaries are required by law to keep. We tracked down the notary who stamped the power of attorney form for Gordon Pike. Mara explained, she is a woman named Linda Halloway. She works at a shipping center about 5 miles from your parents' house. We subpoenaed her journal entry for the date the POA was signed. I looked at the line item. Date, October 12th. Type of act, power of attorney, signer, Sarah Coleman, and then the columns for identification. ID, type, FL driver license, description of signer. I read the handwritten notes in the description column. Female, white, approximately 5'4", blonde. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked at my reflection in the glass. I am 5'9". My hair is black. the kind of deep, dark brown that looks black in most lighting. I have never been blonde in my life. I have never been 5'4" since I was in middle school. It wasn't me, I said to the glass. No, Mara said behind me. It wasn't. And whoever it was, they didn't just look a little bit like you. They looked nothing like you. Which means the notary was either negligent or complicit, or the fake ID was good enough to pass a casual glance if the notary was tired. But it proves fraud, I said, turning back to her. It proves the person who signed the power of attorney was not Sarah Coleman. Mara said, we can use this. We can file a motion to invalidate the representation. If the POA is void, then every agreement Gordon Pike made on your behalf is voidable. I felt a surge of hope, sharp and bright. We have them. We have a path, Mara cautioned. But Sarah, look at the description again. 5'4", blonde. I stared at her. What are you saying? Does that description match anyone you know? I thought about it. My mother was 5'2". She had dyed her hair varying shades of blonde and auburn for 20 years. My stomach dropped. It matches my mother, I whispered. If she used a fake ID with your name but her photo, Mara said, and she stood in front of a notary who just glanced at the name. She trailed off. I sat back down. The victory turned to ash in my mouth. My mother had walked into a shipping center, looked a woman in the eye, and pretended to be me. She had signed my name while standing in her own body, wearing her own face. I need you to talk to them one more time. Mara said, I know you don't want to, but we need to know who the blonde woman was for sure. If it was your mother, we need to know if she's going to admit it. Because if she denies it, and we force a lineup, she didn't have to finish. If we forced a lineup, my mother would be going to prison for forgery. I drove to their house that evening. The rage I had felt before was gone, replaced by a cold, numb determination. I wasn't going there to scream. I was going there to confirm the kill. My parents were in the kitchen. The scene was domestic, terrifyingly normal. My father was reading a magazine. My mother was wiping down the counters. When I walked in, the air changed instantly. They looked at me like I was a creditor coming to collect. Sarah, my mother said, her voice tight. We didn't think you were coming by. I didn't sit down. I stood in the doorway, holding the photocopy of the notary journal. I went to the bank records. I said, I know about the branch in Ocala. I know I was in Chicago. My father put down the magazine. Sarah, please, we told you. It was a mess. We were scrambling. And I know about the notary. I continued, my voice flat. I looked at my mother, Linda Halloway. October 12th. She wrote down that the signer was 5'4" and blonde. My mother stopped wiping the counter. She turned her back to me, facing the sink. I know it was you. Mom, I said, I know you stood there and pretended to be me. She didn't answer. Her shoulders started to shake. It was the only way, my father burst out. He stood up, his face reddening. You don't understand the pressure we were under. The bank needed the POA that day, or they were going to pull the line of credit. We couldn't wait for you to come home from your trip. We couldn't explain everything to you over the phone. So you committed a felony. I said, you forged my signature. You impersonated me. We did it to save the business, he shouted. To save the family assets. What assets? I asked. The boat? The house? You used my credit to save your toys. That is unfair, my mother cried, spinning around. Her face was wet with tears. We have worked our whole lives. We raised you. We paid for your college. We bought you your first car. And now, when we make one mistake, one desperate mistake, you treat us like criminals? You are criminals, I said. That is what the law calls this. Stop saying that, my father roared. He slammed his hand on the table. We are your parents. We are not criminals. We got into a hole. We dug a little deeper to try to get out. That is not crime. That is survival. He took a breath, trying to regain control. His face shifted from rage to a desperate, wheedling bargaining. Look, Sarah, we can fix this. We don't need lawyers. We don't need the police. How? I asked. How do you fix $247,000? We'll sell the boat, he said quickly. It's worth $40,000. I have a buddy who wants it. And the RV. We can get maybe 30 for that. That is 70,000. I said, you owe 250. I'll cash out the rest of the IRA. He said, I'll take the penalty. We'll give you everything. Just stop the lawyers. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you authorized it retroactively. I stared at him. He was asking me to perjure myself. He was asking me to take the federal liability, to destroy my own financial future, so he could avoid the consequences of his actions. He wanted me to absorb the blow. You want me to lie to the federal government? I said, I want you to help your family. He yelled. I am helping my family, I said quietly. I am saving myself. I turned to leave. You walk out that door, my father said, his voice dropping to a low, venomous growl. And you are done. You hear me? You are ungrateful. You are selfish. I didn't stop. I walked out to my car, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I realized then that the parents I thought I had were dead. They had died years ago, replaced by these desperate, hollow people who viewed me as nothing more than a resource to be mined. I went home and opened the second file Mara had given me, the one about the other entities. My parents had insisted the cafe, Harbor Light, was a 6-month failure. A flash in the pan. I logged into the Secretary of State database again. I searched for Seagrass Provisions. Entity name, Seagrass Provisions, LLC. Status, inactive/administratively dissolved. Formation date, 2 years ago. Dissolution date, 6 months ago. It hadn't run for 6 months. It had run for 18 months. I pulled the tax transcript Mara had obtained for Seagrass. The liability was $60,000. Then I searched for the third name, the one I had seen on a stray invoice in the cloud folder. Coleman Event Concepts. Entity name, Coleman Event Concepts Incorporated. Formation date, 3 years ago. Registered agent, Sarah Coleman. I felt sick. This wasn't one restaurant. It was a shell game. I looked at the transcript for Coleman Event Concepts. The liability was $47,000. I did the math on a notepad. Harbor Light, $140,000. Seagrass, $60,000. Coleman Events, $47,000. Total, $247,000. The number on the notice wasn't a single massive debt. It was the sum total of 3 different failures, 3 different schemes, all consolidated under my Social Security number because I was the common denominator. They had moved the debt around like a hot potato, opening one company, racking up payroll taxes, closing it, and opening another, leaving the dead husk of the debt attached to my name each time. It was a Ponzi scheme of failure. And I was the bag holder. I needed to understand the mechanics. How had I missed this? How had 3 years of notices never reached me? I remembered the mailbox store on Elm Street. But notices also go to the last known address on your tax return. My tax returns had my current apartment address. I went to the United States Postal Service website. I navigated to the help section and found the number for the Consumer Affairs Office. I called them the next morning from my desk at work, hiding under my headset. I need to check if there is a mail forwarding order on file for my address. I told the agent. 1 moment, she said. She came back a minute later. Yes, Ms. Coleman, we have a permanent forwarding order on file. It was established 3 years ago. From where to where? I asked. From your address, 123 Oak Street, to P.O. Box 442 on Elm Street. My blood ran cold. 123 Oak Street was my old apartment, the one I moved out of 3 years ago. My parents had set up a forwarding order from my old apartment to their secret mailbox. But wait, I said, I updated my address with the IRS when I moved. Why did the letters go to the old address? Because, the agent explained, if a business entity is tied to a specific address, the system often defaults to that address for business-related correspondence. And if someone kept filing forms using your old address as the business address, they had kept my old address alive. They had used it on the incorporation papers intentionally, knowing I didn't live there anymore, knowing the forwarding order would catch the mail and funnel it straight to their secret box. It was brilliant. It was evil. I hung up the phone. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. This wasn't panic anymore. It was the cold, clinical detachment of an investigator. I wasn't wondering why anymore. I was documenting how. I called Gordon Pike again. This time, I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I recorded the call. "Mr. Pike," I said, "this is Sarah Coleman. I told you." He snapped. "I'm done talking to you. I'm not asking you to talk." I said, "I'm telling you that I just found the mail forwarding order. I found the 3 different entities. I found the consolidation of the debt, and my lawyer is filing the police report this afternoon." He went silent. I continued, "When the police come, Gordon, they are going to ask you about your due diligence. They are going to ask you why you filed taxes for 3 different companies, all owned by a woman you had never met in person." "I did a video call," he insisted. "Once." I said, "For one company. What about the other 2? Did you verify me for Seagrass? Did you verify me for Coleman Events?" He stammered. "It was the same client group." "Client group," I repeated. "That implies multiple people." "Look," he said, his voice dropping. "They gave me the binder." "Okay?" "The binder?" I asked. "The binder. The big blue one. It had everything. Articles of incorporation, EIN letters, prior year returns, voided checks. It was tabbed. It was color-coded. It looked like a CPA had put it together. I thought you were organized. I thought you were a serious entrepreneur." "Who gave you the binder?" I asked. "The father," Pike said. "The older guy. He dropped it off at my office, said his daughter was busy running the catering side, and asked if I could just get the filings caught up. He dropped it off." "So you met him?" I said. "Yeah, I met him. Nice guy. Talked about golf. Said he was just the delivery boy helping his girl out. Thank you. Gordon," I said. I hung up. The binder. My father. The man who couldn't remember his own Netflix password had constructed a color-coded, tabbed binder of forged documents to hand-deliver to a tax preparer to make the fraud look legitimate. He had used my organization skills, the very skills he praised me for, against me. He knew that a messy pile of papers looks suspicious, but a binder? A binder looks like Sarah. I sat there in my car, staring at the dashboard. I stopped arguing for love. I stopped wondering if they cared about me. They didn't. I was a credit score to them. I was a signature. I was a shield they could hide behind while they played business owner. I drove back to my parents' house one last time. Not to talk, to find the binder. I knew they weren't home. Wednesday night was bingo at the community center. They never missed it. Even in the middle of a federal investigation, they wouldn't miss bingo. I still had my key. I let myself in. The house was quiet. I walked past the kitchen, past the den where the locked cabinet was. I checked the cabinet. It was empty. The lock was hanging open. They had moved the files. I checked the bedroom. I checked the home office. Nothing. I went to the garage. My father's workbench was cluttered with tools. There were boxes of Christmas decorations. I saw a stack of mail on the workbench. I flipped through it. Electric bill, water bill, a catalog, and a bill from a self-storage facility. You store it, Unit 419, account holder, Ellen Coleman, my mother. The bill was dated 3 days ago. Past due notice. I looked at the address. It was on the other side of town. Near the marina where the cafe had been. I looked around the garage. Where were the keys? My father had a pegboard where he kept spare keys. I scanned it. Lawnmower key, shed key. And a small brass key with a yellow tag. Unit 419. I took it. I drove to the storage facility. It was a depressing row of orange metal doors behind a chain-link fence. I punched in the gate code. My birthday. Of course. It opened. I drove to Unit 419. I got out, my heart hammering. I slid the key into the padlock. It turned. I rolled up the metal door. The smell of stale coffee and mildew hit me. The unit was full of restaurant equipment, stacks of chairs, a broken espresso machine, Boxes of napkins printed with the Waterfront Cafe. I stepped inside. In the back, on top of a plastic bin filled with aprons, was a box. And next to the box was a blue binder. I opened the binder. It was exactly as Pike had described. Tabbed. Organized. Tab 1, Harbor Light. Tab 2, Seagrass. Tab 3, Coleman Events. I flipped through the pages. It was a chronicle of my destruction. Every tax return, every notice I had never received, every lie. But it was the box next to it that stopped my heart. It was a cardboard banker's box. On the side, written in my mother's handwriting and black marker, were the words, Sarah. Signatures. I opened the lid. Inside were hundreds of sheets of paper, tracing paper, notebook paper, napkins. They were covered in my name, Sarah Coleman, Sarah Coleman, Sarah Coleman. Some were shaky, some were crossed out. Some had notes next to them in my father's handwriting. Too loopy. Make the C sharper. Good match. There were transparencies with my actual signature from high school report cards and birthday cards, taped over blank checks so they could practice tracing the line perfectly. I picked up a legal pad. It was filled with practice runs of the specific signature that appeared on the power of attorney. They hadn't just signed my name, they had studied it. They had turned my identity into a craft project. They had sat at their kitchen table, probably drinking coffee, practicing how to become me so they could steal from me. I stood there in the dusty silence of the storage unit. Holding the legal pad, I felt a physical shift inside my chest, the last tether, the last thin wire of emotional attachment that connected me to them. Snapped. It didn't hurt. It just went dead. I took out my phone. I took photos of the binder. I took photos of the box. I took photos of the practice sheets. Then I picked up the box and the binder. I carried them to my car. I didn't lock the unit. I left the door wide open. The broken espresso machine and the failed dreams of the Waterfront Cafe exposed to the night air. I got in my car and drove away. I had the persuasive evidence Mara needed. I had the proof of lack of control. I had the identity of the true responsible party. The agency wanted a name. I was going to give them two. I drove 2 blocks from the storage facility before the cold. Hard logic of the situation seized my hands and forced me to pull the steering wheel to the right. I slammed on the brakes in the empty parking lot of a closed dry cleaner, the banker's box sliding across the passenger seat and hitting the door with a dull thud. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that wanted me to run, to take this box of evidence to Mara, to lock it in a safe, to burn it. But my brain, the new, icy part of my brain that had been forged in the last 10 days of betrayal, told me to stop. If I took the box, they would know. My parents went to the storage unit sparingly, but if they went tomorrow to hide more evidence and found the binder gone, they would panic. Panic makes people unpredictable. Panic makes people destroy things. If they knew I had the smoking gun, they might shred the remaining financial records at the house. They might flee. They might wipe the laptop I hadn't yet been able to access. I couldn't let them know I had found the body. I just needed the DNA. I threw the car into reverse and drove back to the storage unit. The gate code still worked. The facility was still deserted, a graveyard of forgotten possessions under the buzzing sodium lights. I parked in front of Unit 419 and hauled the box back inside. I sat on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by the failed debris of the Waterfront Cafe, and took out my phone. For the next hour, I became a machine. I opened the scanning app. I snapped a photo. I turned the page. I snapped a photo. I turned the page. Flash. The practice signatures on legal pads. Flash. The transparency overlays taped to checks. Flash. The tabbed binder with the tax returns I never signed. Flash. The rejection letters from banks that had prompted the identity theft in the first place. I documented everything. The metadata on the photos would prove the date and time. The content would prove the intent. When I was done, my battery was at 12%, and my hands were covered in gray dust. I placed the papers back in the box exactly as I had found them. I matched the corner of the binder to the dust outline on the plastic bin. I made sure the lid of the box was skewed slightly to the left, just as it had been. I backed out of the unit. I pulled the metal door down. I snapped the padlock shut. I left the physical evidence in their possession. But the truth was now safe in the cloud, backed up to 3 different servers before I even started the engine. I had what I needed, now. I just had to wait for the right moment to use it. The next morning, Mara Duval's office felt less like a sanctuary and more like a war room. I sat across from her, my phone plugged into her wall charger, while she scrolled through the hundreds of images I had uploaded to her secure portal. She was silent for a long time. When she finally looked up, her expression was a mix of professional admiration and profound pity. "This is systematic," she said quietly. "This isn't just one bad decision. Sarah, this is a curriculum. They were teaching themselves how to be you. Is it enough?" I asked. "Is it enough to stop the levy?" "It is enough to prove forgery," she said. She tapped the screen where an image of a transparency overlay was displayed. "This specifically shows an attempt to replicate a biometric marker. It's damning. But I need to warn you about how the agency works." "Warn me?" I asked. "I thought this was the silver bullet." "It's a bullet," Mara said, "but the target is moving. The agency doesn't adjudicate family drama. They adjudicate liability. Even with this, the revenue officer, Agent Miller, is going to ask 4 questions. 1. Who controlled the money? 2. Who signed the checks? 3. Who benefited? 4. Who can pay?" She leaned forward. "They don't care that your parents are your parents, Sarah. They don't care about the betrayal or the heartbreak. They care about the recovery of federal funds. If we prove you aren't the responsible party, we have to simultaneously hand them the person who is. If we create a vacuum of liability, they will just keep the assessment on you because you are the only one with a W-2 and a pulse they can find. So I have to serve them up," I said, "on a platter." "Yes," Mara said. "We have to construct a narrative where the agency sees an easy path to collection from them, or at least a criminal path that justifies closing your civil case. We have to show that they controlled the funds and they benefited." She looked at her notes. "I'm scheduling the appeals conference for next week. Between now and then, you need to keep your head down. Don't tip your hand. If they know we have this, they might try to transfer assets or hide the money trail that leads to the benefit." I nodded. "I can do that. I can pretend." But the world outside Mara's office wasn't waiting for my timeline. When I got to work an hour late, the atmosphere in the marketing department was brittle. I walked to my cubicle, keeping my head down, but I saw the looks, the whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. I sat down and logged in. There was an email from Linda Gorski, the HR director. Subject: Urgent. Verification request. Importance: Hi, Sarah. Please come to my office immediately. My stomach dropped through the floor. I knew what this was. I walked to Linda's office. The glass walls were frosted, offering a privacy that felt more like a cage. I knocked. "Come in," Linda said. Her voice was cool, stripped of the usual office banter. I sat down. She didn't offer me water. She slid a piece of paper across her desk. "We received this via fax this morning," she said. It was a Form 10003, Verification of Employment and Earnings. The sender was the Department of the Treasury. "It's a prelude to garnishment," Linda said. "They are confirming your salary to calculate the levy percentage. Sarah, you know our policy on financial compliance. We deal with government contracts. Having an employee with active federal tax enforcement is complicated." I looked at the form. It was humiliation in black and white. It reduced my career, my late nights, my successful campaigns, down to a garnishable resource. "Linda," I started, my voice trembling despite my rehearsal. "I know how this looks, but you need to know that I am the victim of identity theft." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Identity theft usually involves credit cards. This is a payroll tax penalty for a business. The form lists you as an officer." "I know." I said, "Someone opened a business in my name. I have retained a tax controversy attorney. We have filed an affidavit of theft. This is not my debt." She looked at me for a long moment. I felt exposed, peeled open. I wanted to scream that it was my parents, that I wasn't a criminal. I was just a daughter who trusted too much, but I couldn't say that. It sounded too messy, too unbelievable. "I am handling it," I said firmly. "It will be resolved. I just need you to know that this is not a reflection of my integrity. It's a crime that was committed against me." Linda sighed. She took the form back. "I have to fill it out." "Sarah, it's a federal requirement. I can't ignore a Treasury request, but I will make a note in your file that you are disputing the liability. Just fix it. Fast. If a levy order actually hits payroll, it triggers a review with legal. You don't want that." I walked back to my desk, feeling the heat of the target on my back. I was paying for stability, working 40 hours a week, climbing the ladder, doing everything right, and my parents had spent the last 3 years dismantling the rungs beneath me. I checked my bank account on my phone. The freeze was still active on the $3,000. I had opened a new account at a different bank, unrelated to the one the agency had hit, and deposited a check from my emergency cash stash, $2,000 I had kept in a fireproof box in my closet. That $2,000 was all I had. I went to the cafeteria and bought a $3 bagel for lunch. I sat alone, eating the dry bread, thinking about the mortgage payment I had seen on the Harbor Light bank statement, $2,400. My parents were living in a 4-bedroom house, paying for it with stolen tax money, while I was counting pennies for a bagel to avoid running out of cash before the levy was lifted. The resentment was a physical taste, bitter and metallic. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the audacity of their comfort. They were sleeping soundly in a bed financed by my nightmares. I needed more than just the signatures. I needed to nail the control aspect Mara had talked about. That night, I went back to the digital trail. The cloud folder I had accessed was a goldmine, but I had exhausted the obvious files. I started looking at the peripheral documents. I found a subfolder labeled Contracts, Equipment. Inside was a PDF for a point-of-sale system. The digital register system for the cafe. I opened it. Service Agreement, Toast. POS. I scrolled through the boilerplate text. Hardware lease, software license, processing fees. Then I reached the setup page. Primary Administrator, Sarah Coleman. Admin login. S. Coleman admin. But then I looked at the creation date of the login profile. Created, August 14th, 3 years ago. I froze. August 14th. I remembered that week clearly. I had dropped my phone in a pool at a friend's barbecue on August 12th. It was dead. I had gone to the store on the 13th and had to change my number because of some carrier issue with the old SIM card. For 3 days that week, I was completely off the grid. No phone, no two-factor authentication, no email access on mobile. Whoever created that login on August 14th couldn't have verified it through my phone. I looked at the recovery contact section of the POS contract. Name, Ellen Coleman. Role, Office Manager/Mother. Phone, 555-0199. There it was. My mother was listed as the recovery contact for the system that processed every single dollar the cafe earned. And the email associated with the S. Coleman admin login? It wasn't the Skolman, Harbor email. It was ecolehman1958gmail.com, my mother's personal email. She hadn't just used my name, she had built a back door. She had set herself up as the fail-safe so that if the system ever flagged a suspicious login or needed a password reset, it would go to her. Not me. She controlled the register. She controlled the cash. I printed the page. This was the authority and control Mara needed. My mother wasn't just a passive beneficiary. She was the administrator of the revenue stream. But I needed a confession, not the weeping, manipulative partial truths they had given me before. I needed the mechanics. I decided to use the practice signatures, just the signatures. I drove to their house on Saturday morning. I didn't call first. I wanted the element of surprise. My father answered the door. He looked tired. His eyes rimmed with red. He was holding a cup of coffee. "Sarah," he said, stepping back. We We didn't expect you." I walked past him into the kitchen. My mother was sitting at the table, staring at a crossword puzzle she wasn't filling out. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I reached into my purse and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a high-resolution print of one of the practice sheets from the storage unit, the one where they had traced my signature over and over on a legal pad. I placed it gently on the center of the table, right on top of the crossword puzzle. "I found the storage unit," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the room. My mother looked at the paper. Her hand flew to her mouth. She made a small, strangled sound. My father stared at it. His face went gray. He slumped into the chair opposite her. "I found the binder." I continued, my voice steady. "I found the transparencies. I found the notes you made about making the C sharper. I looked at them. You practiced." I said, "You didn't just sign my name in a panic. You sat here and practiced. You turned me into a forgery project." My mother started to cry, but it was a quiet, defeated weeping. She didn't look at me. My father rubbed his face with his hands. "Who taught you?" I asked. He looked up. "What? Who taught you to do this?" I asked. "You aren't this organized. Dad, you lose your glasses 3 times a day. But that binder? The transparencies? The way you consolidated the debt across 3 entities? That is professional grade. You had help." He shook his head. "Sarah, it doesn't matter. It matters to the district attorney." I lied. He flinched. "It matters because if you don't tell me, I assume you did it all, but if someone helped you, if someone coached you on how to commit federal fraud." He looked at my mother. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "It was a friend," he said, his voice raspy. "Which friend?" "Carol." He said, "Carol Vance." I knew the name. Carol was the office manager at the construction firm my father had worked for 20 years ago. She was the woman who handled the payroll, the permits, the inspections. She was the one who knew how to bury a mistake in paperwork so deep the auditors never found it. "Carol Vance?" I asked. "She's retired. She does consulting." My father mumbled. "For small businesses. We called her when the bank turned us down. We told her we needed to set up the structure, but we couldn't use our names. And she told you to use mine? She said we needed a straw man." He said, that's the term she used. She said as long as we paid the taxes, it wouldn't matter. She showed us how to do the signatures. She said the bank bots only check for shape, not pressure. She brought the transparencies. So Carol Vance orchestrated the identity theft. I said, "And you executed it. She didn't know it was stealing." He protested weakly. "She thought you were okay with it. We told her. We told her you were too busy to sign the papers yourself." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You lied to everyone. You lied to the bank. You lied to the government. You lied to your accomplice. And you lied to me." I picked up the paper with the signatures. "I have copies of everything." I said, "I have the binder. I have the POS contract with Mom's email. I have the mortgage payments." "Sarah," my mother whispered, "please." "I'm giving this to my lawyer." I said, "All of it." "Wait," my father said. Standing up, he reached out, grabbing my wrist. "Sarah, wait. Just listen." I pulled my arm away. "Don't touch me." "We have a proposal," he said. He was breathing hard. "We talked about it. We can make this right. There is no fixing this." "Dad, the house," he said. I stopped. "What?" "The house," he repeated. He gestured around the kitchen. "This house? It's the only thing we have left with equity. It's worth $600,000. The mortgage is only $200 left. That's $400,000 in equity. So sell it." I said, "Sell it and pay the debt." "We can't sell it now," he said. "The market is down, and if we sell it, we have nowhere to go. We're too old to rent." "Then what are you offering?" "We'll leave it to you," my mother said. She looked up, her eyes wide and hopeful. "We'll rewrite our wills today. The house goes to you, 100%, when we pass." you get the house. That covers the debt and more. You'll come out ahead. Sarah. I stared at them. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to hold on to the back of a chair. You want me to wait for you to die? I asked. It's an investment, my father said, his eyes lighting up with the salesman energy I now recognized as a pathology. You take the hit now, you pay the debt, or you set up the payment plan. We'll make the monthly payments on the plan. I swear. And in exchange, you get the whole estate, the house, everything. It's a guarantee. I looked at the kitchen I had grown up in. I looked at the countertops my mother was so proud of. They were offering me a promise. A someday. Someday is not a deed. I said, What? Someday is not a deed, I shouted. You are asking me to take on $250,000 federal lien today, ruin my credit for 10 years, risk my job, and live in poverty, on the promise that maybe, years from now, you won't have mortgaged this house to the hilt or lost it to a gambling debt or changed your will because I made you mad? We wouldn't change the will, my mother cried. You forged my signature, I screamed. You stole my identity. You don't get to ask for trust anymore. The only currency you have is cash, and you don't have any. I turned and walked to the door. Sarah, my father yelled, that's our final offer. You take the house or you get nothing. I stopped at the door. I looked back at them. They looked small, desperate, and dangerous. I don't want the house. I said, I want my name back. I slammed the door and walked to my car. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. They would never pay. They would never fix it. They would only drag me down until I drowned with them. I drove straight to the nearest FedEx office. I scanned the practice signature sheet I had taken. I emailed it to Mara. Then I called her. File it. I said, Sarah? Mara asked. You're sure? File the request to shift liability. I said, include the POS contract, include the mortgage payments, include the affidavit about Carol Vance, and include the practice signatures. Okay, she said, I'll draft the cover letter. We are arguing that you lacked effective control and that the true responsible persons are Ellen and Robert Coleman, aided by a third-party facilitator. Do it. I said. I hung up. I felt a strange lightness. It was the lightness of burning a bridge while you were still standing on it. Knowing the fall was better than the fire. I went home. I poured a glass of wine that I had bought with cash. I sat on my balcony and watched the city lights. I had done it. I had turned them in. I was free, or so I thought. The next day, a Tuesday, I came home from work to find another certified letter in my mailbox. I didn't panic this time. I was numb to the red ink. I assumed it was just another confirmation of the appeal or a duplicate notice. I walked up to my apartment, kicked off my heels, and tore open the envelope. It wasn't a duplicate. Notice of seizure and sale. I scanned the text. Property to be seized. 1/1/2023 Ford F-150 Platinum Edition. VIN 1FTFW 1E. Registered owner, Sarah Coleman. Location, 442 Elm Street. I stared at the paper. I drove a 5-year-old Honda Civic. I did not own a Ford F-150, and I certainly didn't own a Platinum Edition truck, which I knew cost upwards of $80,000. I looked at the date of registration. 6 months ago. My parents hadn't just used my name for the business. They hadn't just used it for the taxes. My father had bought himself a new truck, a brand new $80,000 truck. And he had registered it in my name so the bank wouldn't see his bad credit, and so the IRS wouldn't seize it for his back taxes. He had offered to sell the boat and the RV to fix the debt. He had never mentioned the truck. He was driving around in a luxury vehicle registered to me while I was being denied purchases at the grocery store. The letter said the seizure was scheduled for 5 days from now. I laughed. It was a hysterical, broken sound that echoed off the walls of my empty apartment. They wanted to seize the truck? I grabbed my keys, let them have it, but I was going to be the one to hand them the keys. The federal building was a monolith of gray stone and tinted glass, designed to make a human being feel small. I stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the rows of identical windows. clutching the handle of my briefcase so hard my fingers ached. Inside that bag was the anatomy of a betrayal. The binder, the photos, the practice signatures, the bank records. It was everything I needed to save myself, and everything I needed to destroy the people who had raised me. Mara Duval was waiting for me by the security checkpoint. She wore a suit that looked like armor, sharp and dark. She didn't smile. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. I wasn't ready, but I was done. We went through the metal detectors. I watched my bag slide through the X-ray machine, the ghostly outline of the evidence flickering on the screen. It felt symbolic. I was about to expose the bones of my family's secrets to the cold light of federal scrutiny. The appeals conference was held in a small, windowless room on the 14th floor. The air conditioning hummed with a low, aggressive drone. The table was made of cheap laminate that pretended to be wood. The appeals officer was a man named Mr. Henderson. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes that had seen every variation of a lie. He had the thick file, my life, stacked in front of him. "Ms. Coleman," he said, his voice neutral. "We are here to discuss your request for relief from the trust fund recovery penalty regarding Harbor Light Hospitality, Seagrass Provisions, and Coleman Event Concepts. The total liability currently stands at $247,000. I sat down. Mara opened her briefcase and began to lay out our exhibits. She moved with the precision of a surgeon. "Exhibit A," Mara said, "travel records and geolocation data placing Sarah Coleman in Chicago, Dallas, and Seattle on the dates the banking resolutions and powers of attorney were signed." She slid the papers across the table. Henderson picked them up. Adjusting his glasses, he looked at the flight receipts. He looked at the hotel folios. He didn't speak. "Exhibit B," Mara continued. "Notary journal entry from Linda Halloway. The physical description of the signer is 5'4" and blonde. My client is 5'9" with black hair." Henderson nodded slowly. "We have seen this before," he said. "Impersonation is a common tactic." "Exhibit C," Mara said, her voice dropping an octave. "This is the mail forwarding order established 3 years ago, diverting all correspondence from Sarah's previous residence to a commercial mailbox controlled by the true operators." She laid down the printout from the post office. "And finally," she said, "Exhibit D." She reached into the box I had brought and pulled out the legal pad, the one from the storage unit, the one with the practice signatures. She placed it in the center of the table. This was recovered from a storage unit leased by Ellen Coleman. Mara said, "It demonstrates a concerted, practiced effort to replicate my client's signature over a period of months." Henderson leaned forward. He stared at the page. He traced the lines of ink with his eyes, the shaky attempts, the corrections, the final, confident forgeries. He looked up at me, for the first time. His expression shifted from bureaucratic boredom to something sharper. "You found this?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, surprising me. "I found it in a box labeled Sarah's Signatures." "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Henderson asked. The question was sharp. A sudden pivot. The file shows notices going back 3 years. We sent certified letters. We sent intent to levy warnings, even if the mail was diverted. "Ms. Coleman, you are a corporate officer. Did you never ask to see the books? Did you never wonder why you weren't signing tax returns?" "I didn't know there were books to see." I said, "I didn't know there was a corporation." He looked at me skeptically. "You're a marketing professional. You understand business. Your parents opened a cafe. You didn't know?" "I knew they had a cafe." I said, "I thought it was theirs. I thought I was just the supportive daughter who came for brunch on Sundays. I didn't know my name was on the lease. I didn't know my social security number was on the payroll account. I didn't know they had set up a fake email address that looked like mine." Henderson leaned back in his chair. He tapped a pen against the file. "I'm going to be honest with you. Ms. Coleman," he said, "we suspected you were a stand-in." The room went silent. "Excuse me?" I asked. "The profile didn't fit," he said, shrugging. "We see this a lot. A failing business. A desperate owner with bad credit. And suddenly, a fresh name appears on the paperwork, usually a child or a spouse. We knew you probably weren't running the day-to-day operations. Then why? I asked, my voice rising. Why garnish my wages? Why freeze my bank account? If you knew I wasn't running it, why ruin me? Because you were the solvent path. He said simply, the words hung in the cold air. The solvent path. He continued, his tone matter of fact. Your parents, assuming they are the true operators, have no assets we can easily touch. They have a mortgage. They have liens. They are judgment-proof. You, on the other hand, have a steady corporate job. You have a savings account. You have a future. The system is designed to collect revenue. Ms. Coleman, it follows the path of least resistance. You were the easiest outcome. I felt a chill that started in my marrow. It wasn't just my parents who had victimized me. It was the machinery of the state. I was just a number that added up. My innocence was irrelevant. My ability to pay was the only thing that mattered. That is exactly why we are requesting an immediate release of the levy. Mara interjected, her voice hard. You have admitted on the record that you suspect she is a nominee. We have provided proof of forgery. We have provided proof of lack of control. To continue enforcement against Sarah Coleman now is an abuse of discretion. Henderson sighed. He looked at the practice signatures again. I agree, he said. I let out a breath. However, he added, raising a finger, I cannot just close the file. The debt exists. $247,000 of trust fund taxes are missing. Someone has to pay. If I release you, I need to open a case against someone else immediately. He looked me in the eye. Will you sign a statement naming who did this? He slid a form across the table. Form 3949A, Information Referral. I need you to swear, under penalty of perjury, that Ellen and Robert Coleman, along with this Gordon Pike and Carol Vance, knowingly and willfully committed these acts. This will trigger a criminal investigation. It may lead to prosecution. I looked at the form. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt heavy. If I sign this, I asked, what happens to them? Henderson shrugged. CI takes over. They interview the notary. They interview Pike. They subpoena the storage unit records. If the evidence holds up, they face felony charges, wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion. They could go to prison. My mother, who was afraid of thunderstorms. My father, who needed a special pillow for his back. Prison. We need a recess, Mara said. Sensing my hesitation, 5 minutes. Henderson nodded. Take 10. We walked out of the conference room. The hallway was empty, echoing with the sound of our footsteps. You have to sign it. Sarah, Mara said quietly. I know. I said, if you don't, the debt stays on you. They will take your paycheck for the next 10 years. They will take your tax refunds. You will never buy a house. You will never get a loan. You will be paying for their mortgage until you are 45. I know, I snapped. I walked away from her. Toward the elevators. I just need air. I need to breathe for a second. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked out the front doors of the federal building into the bright, blinding sunlight of the plaza. The city noise washed over me. Traffic. Sirens. People talking. It felt jarringly normal. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I was going to do it. I was going to send my parents to prison. It was the only way to survive. I turned to go back inside, and then I saw the car. It was parked in a loading zone. Hazard lights flashing. A blue sedan. My father's car. I froze. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text message from Mom. We are outside. Please don't do this. I stared at the screen. How? How did they know I was here? I hadn't told them. I hadn't posted it. Then I realized the family plan. Years ago, we had set up Find My Friends on our iPhones so we could track each other on road trips. I had never turned it off. I had forgotten I was even on their data plan. They had tracked me to the federal building. The car door opened. My mother stepped out. She looked small. frail. She was wearing a coat that was too big for her. My father got out of the driver's side. He looked angry. "Sarah," my mother called out. She ran toward me across the plaza. People turned to look. I stood my ground. I didn't run. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. "You can't go back in there," my mother said. Reaching for my arm, I pulled away. "Sarah, please, if you sign that paper, you destroy us. You destroyed yourselves." I said, "You destroyed me." "We raised you," she hissed, her voice changing from pleading to demanding. "We sacrificed everything for you. The piano lessons, the college tuition, the car. We gave up our lives so you could have yours. That's what parents do." "Mom," I shouted, "that doesn't give you the right to steal my identity. It doesn't give you the right to put $250,000 of debt on my back. It's just money." "Sarah," my father yelled, coming up behind her, "it's just numbers on a screen. You're young. You can bounce back. We can't. We're old. If they take the house, if they take the pension, we die on the street. Is that what you want? You want to kill your parents?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had taught me to fish, the man who had walked me down the aisle at my sister's wedding. Wait, I didn't have a sister. He had walked me to the stage at graduation. The memories were blurring, tainted by the man standing in front of me now. "You aren't worried about dying on the street." I said, "You're worried about losing your toys. I'm worried about survival." He said, "Survival?" I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. I saw the seizure notice. "Dad." He stopped. His mouth opened, then closed. "The Ford F-150, I said. "The Platinum Edition. The one you registered in my name 6 months ago." He went pale. "You told me you were broke," I said. "You told me you needed to sell the boat to pay the debt. But you went out and bought an $80,000 truck, and you put it in my name because you knew your credit was shot, and you knew the IRS would take it if it was in yours." "We needed a reliable vehicle," he muttered. "You needed a status symbol," I screamed. "You are driving a luxury truck while I can't buy milk. You are paying for that truck with money you should have paid to the government." "It was for the business," my mother interjected. "To make deliveries. There is no business," I yelled at her. "It's dissolved. It's a shell." I looked at them, really looked at them. I realized then that this wasn't about money. It was about control. They had kept me on the family plan not to be close to me, but to track me. They had used my name not because they trusted me, but because they owned me. In their minds, I was an extension of them. My credit score was their credit score. My life was their resource. The paperwork, the binder, the forgeries, the fake IDs, that was just the weapon. The motive was entitlement. They believed they had a right to burn me to keep themselves warm. "I'm done," I said. "Sarah, wait," my mother cried. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You owe us. You owe us this. Just take the debt. We'll pay it off. I promise. Just don't name us. Don't sign the paper." I looked at her hand on my wrist. I remembered that hand putting Band-Aids on my knees. I remembered that hand stroking my hair. I pulled my wrist free. "I don't owe you my life," I said. I turned around. "Sarah," my father shouted, "if you walk away, you are dead to us. You hear me? Dead." I didn't stop. I walked back toward the glass doors. I walked through the lobby. I took the elevator up to the 14th floor. I walked back into the conference room. Henderson and Mara were waiting. I sat down. I pulled the Form 3949A toward me. I picked up the pen. "Ms. Coleman?" Henderson asked. "Are you sure?" I looked at the form. Name of taxpayer: Harbor Light Hospitality, LLC. Alleged violators: Ellen Coleman, Robert Coleman, Gordon Pike, Carol Vance. I thought about the truck. I thought about the mortgage. I thought about the practice signatures. I thought about the humiliation at the grocery store. "I am sure," I said. I signed my name. It wasn't the shaky signature of a victim. It wasn't the forged signature of a ghost. It was my signature. Sharp, angular, final. I pushed the paper across the table. Henderson took it. He stamped it. "Received. Thank you." Ms. Coleman, he said, based on this affidavit and the supporting evidence of forgery and lack of control, I am authorizing a hold on all collection activities against you personally. We will shift the assessment investigation to the individuals named. He typed something into his computer. The levy is released, he said. Your bank account should be accessible within 24 hours. I felt a rush of relief, but it wasn't the warm, fuzzy kind. It was the cold, clinical relief of a diagnosis. The cancer was cut out. But I was still bleeding. There is one thing, Henderson said, looking up. What? I asked. The release applies to the liabilities we know about, the $247,000. But if this scheme is as extensive as you say, if there are other entities, other years, those will be treated as separate cases. We can only fix what is in the file. I understand. I said. Mara walked me out of the building. We stood on the sidewalk. The blue car was gone. You did the right thing, Mara said. I know, I said, but it doesn't feel like a victory. It's not a victory, she said. It's a survival. I went home. My apartment was quiet. I sat on my couch and opened my banking app. The padlock icon was gone. The $3,000 was available. I could buy groceries. I could pay my rent. I was back to zero. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. I thought about my parents. I wondered where they were. I wondered if they were running, or if they were sitting in their kitchen, blaming me, rewriting the history of our family to make themselves the martyrs. They would never understand. They would go to their graves believing I had betrayed them. I checked my phone. I removed myself from the family plan. I blocked their numbers. I blocked their emails. I was an orphan now, a solvent, free, protected orphan. The buzzer on my intercom rang. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the panel and pressed the button. Yes? Delivery, a voice said. Certified mail. My heart skipped a beat. Certified mail. I buzzed him in. I opened my door and waited. The mail carrier walked up the stairs, holding a thick envelope. Sign here, he said. I signed. My hand shook slightly. I took the envelope inside. It looked exactly like the first one, the same official font, the same heaviness, but the return address was different. It wasn't the Department of the Treasury. It was the State Department of Revenue. I tore it open. Notice of intent to assess. Taxpayer. Coleman Consulting Group. Responsible party. Sarah Coleman. Tax period. 4 years ago. I stared at the name. Coleman Consulting Group. It wasn't Harbor Light. It wasn't Seagrass. It wasn't Coleman Events. It was a fourth company. And the date? 4 years ago. Before the cafe. Before the construction business failed. They hadn't started this 3 years ago. They had started it long before I even knew I was a target. I looked at the amount. Liability. $82,000. I laughed. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. I sat there, holding the letter, laughing until tears ran down my face. The web wasn't just wide. It was infinite. I had cut off the head of the snake, but the eggs had hatched years ago. I picked up my phone. I dialed Mara. Don't close the file. I said, Why? She asked. I just got another one. I said, Coleman Consulting Group. There was a long silence on the line. Okay, Mara said. Bring it in. We go again. I hung up. I looked at the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor. I wasn't done. I would never be done. As long as my name was Sarah Coleman. I was a crime scene. But I was ready now. I knew the enemy. And next time, I wouldn't just bring a binder, I would bring a bulldozer. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones holding the knife. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And tell me, what would you have done if you found that binder in the storage unit? Would you have turned your parents in? Or tried to pay the debt? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of betrayal and justice. Share your thoughts in English. I read every single one. Stay safe and check your credit reports.